In this part, we are going to understand saving and investment in the national income accounts. As a starting point for an analysis of financial markets, we discuss in this section the key macroeconomic variables that measure activity in these markets. Here, our emphasis is not on behavior but on accounting. So, what is accounting? Accounting here refers to how various numbers are defined and added up. A personal accountant might help an individual add up his income and expenses. A national income accountant does the same thing. What do you think about an individual accountant? The same thing for the economy as a whole. National income accounts include, in particular, the GDP. Okay? So here, let me make this small. We are going to talk about important identities in this part. What is an identity? Identity is an equation that must be true because of the way the variables in the equation are defined. Identities are very useful because they are helping us keep in mind, for they clarify how different variables are related to one another. Here we are going to talk about some national accounting identities. Let's first decide with our GDP identity. GDP symbolizes, as you remember, YY is equal to C plus consumption plus investment plus government purchases plus net exports. Net export is export minus imports. This equation is an identity because every dollar expenditures that shows up on the left side, there is a $1 increase here on the left side, it has to show up in one of the four components on the right hand side. It has to show up in one of these four components. So because of the way each of the variables is defined and measured, this equation must always hold. In this chapter, we are going to talk about a closed economy. A closed economy is one that does not interact with other economies. So in particular, a closed economy does not engage in international trade in goods and services, nor does it engage in international borrowing and lending. Since we assume a closed economy, this part will be zero. No trade. This country is a closed economy. Okay? Since this part now zero, our national income accounting becomes y is equal to C plus I plus G. Only three terms. So GDP is the sum of consumption, investment, and government purchases. Each unit of output sold in a closed economy is either consumed, invested, or bought by the government. Now I'm going to play around with this national income accounting identity. How I'm going to do that? I am going to get C and G on the other side. So Y minus C minus G is going to give me I, which is investment, right? Now I leave investment alone. The left-hand side of this equation, Y minus C minus G, is the total income in the economy that remains after paying for consumption and government purchases. This amount, later on in the following slides, we will call this as national saving too. But first, let's look at different definitions, different kinds of saving to understand the definition of saving, which is on the slide. Okay, now let's go back to the slide. Okay, here what you see is there are two different kinds of saving in the economy. The first one is the private saving. Think of for yourself the income you get every month. You pay tax and consume some of them, and the leftover, if there is going to be your saving. And if you think the whole economy, if everybody does the same thing, people sure do the same thing. So the total income minus tax minus consumption will give you the private saving for the economy. So what is private saving? It is the portion of household's income that is not used for consumption or paying taxes. But that's not the only type of saving in the economy. There is one more, which is public saving. Public saving means there is another agent in the economy, which is government. Government also saves if there is a leftover. What is the income for government? Is the tax revenue minus its expenditures. So the public saving is the tax revenue less government spending. Okay? And when we say national saving, that means whole saving in the economy. It is the sum of private saving, which is Y minus T minus C. Okay, we define it. Income, you pay taxes and consumption, plus public saving, which is tax revenue minus the government expenditures. If you open up the parentheses, you will realize that y minus t minus c plus t minus g. Minus t and plus t will cancel each other, so what is left over is y minus c minus g. You see that identity before. You remember I define investment as y minus c minus g. Now what I find, saving is equal to same too. So in a closed economy, which is very important, saving is equal to investment. Okay. So let's start from beginning. Recall the national income accounting identity, C plus I plus G plus NX. But in a closed economy, this is 0. So Y is equal to C plus I plus G. Now I want to leave I alone to find out how I can find I. I is investment is equal to Y minus C minus G. That is left over after you spend for consumption and government expenditures, that is left over for the firms to invest. And from national saving definition, I find out that national saving is private saving plus public saving. Private saving is income minus tax minus consumption, and public saving is the tax revenue left over after government makes expenditures. And this definition this national definition brings us, again, national saving is Y minus C minus G, which is the same definition, that same identity that we did for investment. So as you see, in a closed economy, saving is equal to investment. We have two more definitions to do for this chapter. The first one is budget surplus. An excess of tax revenue over government spending is called budget surplus. So if government spends less than its tax revenue, there is some positive number left, which is called budget surplus, public saving. Budget deficit, a shortfall of tax revenue from government spending. So if government spends more than the tax revenue, there is going to be a shortfall, which means a deficit in the budget. It's a negative public saving. Now here we have one example to understand these identities. Suppose GDP equals 10 trillion. So you are going to write immediately GDP equals 10 trillion. Consumption equals 6.5 trillion. Government spends, government expenditures 2 trillion. And the budget deficit, what is budget deficit? Is T minus G or G minus T is equal to 0.3 trillion. 300 billion, but it's 0.3 trillion. Okay. Now we need to find public saving, taxes, private saving, national saving, and investment. Here, as you see, the budget deficit is my public saving. But now it's a deficit. Public saving has to be a negative number. As you remember, deficit is negative public saving, is minus 0.3. Or public saving is T minus G. How we find T minus G? G minus T is equal to 0.3. G is 2 minus T is equal to 0.3. So from here, T is equal to, if you do that calculation, 1.7. You can always check whether you do right. 2 trillion minus 1.7 will give you 0.3. Okay. So since public saving is T minus G, 1.7 minus 2 will give you minus 0.3. It is my public saving. Let's look at the other parts of the question. And the question asks next, what is taxes? We find taxes. Tax is 1.7. Okay, how about private saving? Private saving says that private saving is Y minus tax. From my income, I pay tax, I pay consumption is my private saving. So income is 10, tax is 1.7, minus 6.5 will give you the private saving. If you do this calculation, 8.2, private saving will be equal to 1.7. Okay. And what is national saving? National saving is the sum of private saving plus public saving. Private saving is 1.7 plus minus 0.3. I think I make a mistake here. 1.8, it should be 1.8 here. And then national saving is equal to 1.5. So what is investment? And I know that in a closed economy, saving, national saving is equal to investment is one way to tell that what is going to be the investment, which is 1.5. Or you can do from Y minus C minus G definition. You know 10 trillion, you know 6.5, you know 2. And if you do this calculation, you will find again the investment 1.5. So as you see here, if you know the identities, it's just plugging the numbers and finding. It's like a puzzle. Okay? And you can find the answers here. And here is another example. You try to work on this example and you can find on the following slides the answers of it. Now in this part, this is the last part of investment and saving in national accounting. We are going to understand the meaning of saving and investment. The terms saving and investment can sometimes be confusing. Most people use these terms casually and sometimes interchangeably. By contrast, the macroeconomists who put together the national income accounts use these terms carefully and distinctly. So, private saving is the income remaining after the households pay their taxes and pay for consumption. This is a definition, but let me make an example to understand the meaning of saving and investment. Suppose that Larry earns more than he spends and deposits his unspent income in a bank or use it to buy some stock or a bond from a corporation. Because Larry's income exceeds his consumption, he adds to the national saving. Okay? Larry might think himself as investing his money, but it's not actually. In a macroeconomist would call Larry as acting as saving rather than investment. Because looking at the definition, it is the income available after you pay tax and consumption. If you put this money into the bank, it's a saving for you. Although you may think that when you buy stocks and bonds, you invest this money. It's in macroeconomic terms, it's a saving. Okay? So examples of what households do with saving: buy corporate bonds or equities, purchase a certificate of deposit at the bank, buy shares of a mutual fund, or you can accumulate saving in a saving or checking account. Investment, let's look at the definition. Investment is the purchase of new capital in economic terms. So in the language of macroeconomics, investment refers to the purchase of new capital such as equipment or building. When Mo borrows from the bank to build himself a new house, he adds to the nation's investment because now you're buying a new capital. Okay? So remember, the purchase of a new house is the one form of household spending that is investment rather than consumption. Similarly, when the Curly Corporation sells some stock and uses the proceeds to build a new factory, it also adds to the nation's investment. And here are some examples of investment. General Motors spends $250 million to build a new factory in Flint, Michigan. You buy $5,000 worth of computer equipment for your business, and your parents spend $3,000 to have a new house built. As you see, it's all purchases of new capital. And remember, in economics, investment is not the purchase of stocks and bonds. And although the accounting identity saving is equal to investment shows that saving and investment are equal for the economy as a whole, this does not have to be true for every individual household or firm. Larry's saving can be greater than his investment and he can deposit the excess in a bank. Okay? Or Moa's saving can be less than his investment and he can borrow the shortfall from a bank. Banks or other financial institutions make these individual differences between saving and investment possible by allowing one person's saving to finance another person's investment. Okay, that's why we have financial intermediaries.